and explained to him what we thought everyone would mute their phones or their computers. Thank you. He asked us to explain to him what we thought our charge was, what we thought our mission was. And I explained to him what we were doing, who we had to speak to us last week, and what we were doing with that information as far as policing was, as far as what they had spoken about, what we had basically as a group taken away from that, and how powerful the videos were, as well as what those individuals had said to us as a group. And he asked then who else we were looking to hear from, and I told him that we had given Eric, a list of names that we wanted to hear from, and he was contacting those individuals to try to get them scheduled over the remaining weeks. What Eric said and what John said during the meeting is that Metro MNPS is being rather a challenge. They're not being very cooperative, and I'm going to let Sharon address that in just a minute. But they're not being cooperative as trying to schedule a meeting. So that's a little bit of a fly in the ointment right now. I know that Eric is scheduling some other meetings. I have been able to schedule a meeting on the 1st of October with Ellen, who is with, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on her last name, which I know extremely well. Ellen Abbott, I'm sorry. She is with the Department of Substance Abuse Services with the Commissioner of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services for the state of Tennessee. And she deals with, one of the things she deals with is the CIT program, which is in Memphis and in several other cities around the state. So she's going to come present that program to us, which is kind of a follow-up to what we listened to at the Brown Bag on Tuesday from Amanda Brock, from Angie Thompson, and from Deputy Chief Huggins. So she's going to present that information to us on the 1st. Sharon, if you want to go ahead and discuss what you've followed up with MNPS.
Okay, I put in a call today with Dr. Battle because we have not been able to secure a representative from the school system to really discuss the resource officers and the interaction. However, we had not asked Dr. Battle to supply someone, so possibly taking that up one level might help us. I think that at this point we can level set where we are, and this is probably more for my benefit than anyone else, because I've tried to gather thoughts in my role as vice chair, because I'm going to try to write down some recommendations, and it may be later in the agenda because we're doing updates and review of the agenda, but we also have a recommendations discussion later. Do you want me to go over some of where we are now or later? Which would you prefer?
Why don't we do that later after we listen to what Robert Haas has, because he's got more on community policing, and yes. I think that will give us some additional ideas once we listen to him.
Yes, because one of the issues that we'll have to address is what we are asking the police force to do, and maybe some of the things that have traditionally been police responsibility, maybe something that we need another organization to look at whether or not it would make more sense for them to take on that mission. So I guess we can go ahead and get started.
Can I address the MNPS thing real quick? I'm sorry. As a teacher, when I got assigned to this commission by the mayor, I got in touch with Dr. Battle. Dr. Battle assigned me to Ashford Hughes, who is the new executive officer of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I think I emailed both of you ladies about this at the end of last week's meeting, but maybe it got lost in there. But I've been talking to Ashford Hughes back and forth, and I can send you notes. So I've met with him a couple of times, and he was going to set up a meeting for me and other people from the committee to talk with the person who's the head of the FROs, but he's not been able to do that yet. So I just want to let you know.
Okay, perfect.
So I've been working hard as the teacher to try to, so Dr. Battle passed it on to Ashford Hughes, and he and I have been talking back and forth. And I know he used to be in the mayor's office.
Yeah, I know Ashford very well. Mm-hmm.
So that communication has been ongoing. And like I said, I can send my notes out to you again, but after Dia presented last week and said, if you're doing other work outside, please pass that on. Maybe it got lost in there, but I tried to pass that on to you ladies and just say, how can I help? If that helps.
Okay, that's very helpful because we would like someone to address that issue because that is one of the pillars or one of our foundation elements. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
John? John, Dia?
I don't think Dia's on. I think John is on, but I guess we can go ahead and start with Robert.
Robert, I guess you're going to introduce yourself. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
That's okay. I'm used to that. So I want to thank John Button for this opportunity and Judge and members of the Communities Committee to really have an opportunity to talk to you about a new concept in policing and really thinking about policing in a very different way. I think the challenge here is that we tend, as we start to think about what the police can do, and Ms. Robinson kind of touched upon that, I think what I'm asking you to do during this conversation is just have a blank palette, right? Because there are a lot of things the police could be doing that really would support, augment, and really engage with the community. And because of its proximity and position within the community, really has a lot of opportunities to kind of really change its mission and broaden its mission in a way that it's not solely relying upon law enforcement. Let me just step back a little bit and just give you a little bit about my background. I've been in policing for 40 years. Up to May 2016, I served as the police commissioner in Cambridge, Massachusetts for 9 years. Prior to that, I served on the governor's cabinet as the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security Advisor. I served as a police chief in another community in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, for 12 years, and I started my policing career in New Jersey. So when I start to talk very fast, it's my New Jersey coming through as I'm talking. But the last 4 years, I've really been engaged in a lot of consulting. And in fact, one of my very first projects was in Nashville. I was part of the Violent Reduction Network under President Obama's DOJ initiative, where we were going into cities and helping police departments think about how they could start to address violent crime in a way that was much more opposed to oppression and suppression, but really starting to engage with the community and start to work on that. And I think you heard a little bit about collective efficacy, and that was part of the work I was doing in Clinton and 40th, and we started to do some work in Casey Holmes in the East Precinct. I just know how far I got. I've been in Nashville probably, transitioned through VRN into the Trump's initiative that they called the Public Safety Partnerships, which is an extension of VRN. So I was there in Nashville for 3 years. So I really had a good feel for what was going on in the police department. After that, I did some work with NYU School of Law, the policing project, and we started to look at the stop ratios and the efficacy of stops and its impact in terms of crime. So we were actually part of that report as well that came out after that. So I've got a history with Nashville for a while now in terms of doing a variety of different things in Nashville. The model I'm going to talk to you about really, as much as it may sound like community policing, please do not confuse it with community policing. The challenge I have a lot of times when I talk about community policing is that people translate what they know about policing and community policing to the concepts I'm talking about here. And what I'm talking about here is a very holistic approach to policing. I'm talking about where the focus and the concentration and the priority of the neighborhood-based policing initiative or co-production of public safety, which we're calling in Hill and Hines, is the notion that community comes first. Engaging with the community, building relationships, building trust with the community is the key to really starting to address a variety of different issues. And that the law enforcement mission of the police department becomes very small and starts to shrink over time. And what the police department becomes is a larger service delivery system, working with other service providers in a collaboration and a partnership, not handing off, but being part of that network and really starting to look at what people's needs are, identify what the community wants as priorities, listening to the community in terms of its priorities, and really engaging with the community. Collective efficacy is a strategy that fits within that model. It is not the overarching model. It is one of many strategies that fit within that model. So that's one approach. And what that approach is really designed to do is start to build social cohesion in a neighborhood where there is none. In a neighborhood that's been disadvantaged, marginalized, and forgotten over time. And really starting to empower that neighborhood to get ownership of that neighborhood. Clinton and 40th is a prime example where the residents really were victims, day in and day out. And that was going on for 40 years. And the thing that was baffling about it is it's such a small neighborhood that the police could not change the direction of that. However, in the course of 18 months, those relationships changed drastically. And it's because of the approach the police took, police seeing their roles as being connectors, ambassadors, advocators, in fact, really working with other city agencies and other city services to really support that neighborhood and really make it a place that it was safe again for folks to live in a certain degree of comfort. It is not designed to take care of all the situations, the socioeconomic situations that got us here, but it's a matter of urgency. And it's a matter of addressing those things very quickly as opposed to trying to deal with a lot of systemic and social networks that really have been broken for a long, long period of time. And how do you start to turn that around very quickly so people start to feel it quickly? And then what it's predicated upon is public trust and confidence in the police. It's predicated upon police officers having geographic ownership within their neighborhood. So you're not moving officers around all the time. They're there on a permanent basis because the only way that you're going to build that trust is through relationships. The only way you build relationships is with people knowing each other and having communication and having regular contact. So when I do, in fact, call the police, I know who's coming because I've met those officers because I see them all the time. And that's what you saw happening in a very small way in Clinton and 40th. Those same officers were coming back into the community, making relationships with those residents, and the residents started to trust them because they knew that if they called them, that they were there to assist them, not to give them a hard time, not to use some of their law enforcement techniques. Well, they'd used them when they had to, but really getting people connected to services. So more globally, what this means is that every precinct in Nashville would be operating under the model. Every officer in a holistic approach would be engaged in neighborhood-based policing. Right now, most times, that function is relegated to a special unit or a small number of officers. And other officers in patrol, what they're engaged in is what they call real police work, which has really gotten us in the situation that we're in right now. And I think what was really innovative in Nashville was they took those flex teams, which were basically strike teams that were going into areas where there's a lot of crime, and really engaged in what was called suppression enforcement. They were stopping everything that moved in that neighborhood with the idea that if they saw a high police presence, that would suppress crime. Part of the NYU study showed that there was really no correlation, that crime has a life of its own and it will move from place to place, and that those types of tactics, as opposed to causing collateral damage to the neighborhood, really didn't serve the kind of purposes that they were dealing with. So what you saw happen in the West Precinct was converting some of those flex units into what were called community engagement units. And one of those units was stationed in Clinton and 40th. And the idea was to continue to expand that model. I know in the East Precinct, they were starting to look at it the same way and starting to think about James Casey Holmes in terms of actually having that same kind of model. But those models are there to build those neighborhoods and communities to become socially cohesive neighborhoods where folks now have an opportunity to meet, have conversations. Part of the conversation we're having when I was meeting with the officers was asking them, is the neighborhood ready to come together and organize themselves? And that's what they were working towards, so they could actually meet with the residents, have the residents tell them what their priorities were, have the officers identify and understand what those priorities are. So they were listening, not automatically responding to it, and then thinking about what kinds of services really could be beneficial, and then reaching out to those other services. I'll tell you one interesting story, which I thought was kind of interesting. I guess the mayor had set up a citizen complaint hotline, and the officers weren't getting a lot of response because they had set up this committee. So what they were doing is they were using that hotline anonymously to get services brought back into that neighborhood initially, and then it evolved from there. But it was just kind of interesting how they were being very creative in terms of how they really started to connect to services and get services involved. Apart from geographic ownership, basically what you're doing is you're inverting the police organization. You're taking the organization from a very hierarchical organization, and you're actually empowering the officers that are doing the work in the field. And you're giving them latitude and ability to work and engage with the community. You're giving them time away from the radio so that they have time to engage, They have time to work with the community in terms of building problem-solving strategies. They have time to confer with the community and making sure that the types of things they're going to do is consistent with what the neighborhood wants. In essence, what the communities are saying, the neighborhoods are saying, this is how we want policing done in our neighborhood, and the police responding in kind that way. And everything the police do is based on collaborative partnerships, including what they do with the communities and also in terms of their external resources as they identify external resources, whether it be the schools, it be other city departments, it be social service providers, mental health providers, in terms of really connecting folks to the kinds of services they need and really making sure that they can take away some of the barriers and some of the complexities of how you navigate into those systems. A lot of times when people are in trouble, they don't know where to go. A lot of time when they call the police, what they're saying to the police is, I am stuck, I need help, I don't know where to go. Most times the police do say, well, that's not in our bailiwick, that's not part of our mission. And they basically either do a handoff or just say it's not a police problem. In this situation, in this model, everything that comes to the police is their problem. Everything that comes to the police is a challenge for them to figure out how they work with their partners to solve those issues. And how do you do that? So what you do is you take your entire patrol force and you divide it into 3 tiers of responsibilities. The first tier is what we call rapid response. Those officers will continue to answer calls for service. They tend to be the younger officers that are coming onto the department for the first time. That middle tier, that core tier, are what we're calling sector officers. And they're the officers that have that geographic ownership within their precinct, that they stay in that precinct. And they're given up to 30% of their time off the radio to engage with the community, go to community meetings, meet with community, start to build relationships. And then the upper tier are what we call neighborhood coordinating officers. These are 2 officers that are dedicated to that same geographic area, and their job is to do exactly what their title is to coordinate responses, coordinate problem solving, coordinate community meetings, and making sure they're coordinating with the other officers who are assigned to that sector to work as a team across all the different shifts. So there's a consistency of policing going on in that neighborhood. You don't have what's going on in a day shift different from the afternoon shift, different than the midnight shift. It's coordinated, and they're working in tandem with one another, and they start to work as teams. And what happens over time as you start to look at those areas that are really calling for police services and starting to address them in a very sophisticated way and really looking at what the root causes are, because a lot of the root causes to chronic and repetitive problems has nothing to do with crime. It's other issues that drive it, and it manifests itself into crime. Crime is just a symptom of something else. So really understanding what's driving those kinds of things, understanding, and what I say to cops all the time is, we never take the time to ask why. And this is a deep dive in understanding why something's happening within a particular geographic area, and then working with the community to address those underlying issues, and a lot of times involving other services, doing the front end of a lot of community services, but also doing a lot of the follow-on, because it's the relationships they're building with those folks as well. So those folks also trust the police when they know they're in trouble. And how they do that? They call those officers, those neighborhood coordinating officers who are equipped with mobile phones directly. They don't need to go through 911. And it's those officers' responsibilities to respond to those kinds of calls for service. And what you find happens, all your stack calls and your repetitive calls shrink drastically because A, they're addressing repetitive areas or areas that are causing a lot of harm to the community, but also requiring a lot of police services. But also they're establishing relationships now, and as things happen, the community starts to preempt things before they manifest themselves into something else, right? So that's that trust I talked about. That is the central piece of that. So when you start to think about violent crime, you think about crime. Crime is a byproduct of that relationship. It is not point A to point B. So it's through the community, what we call shared responsibilities, that the community is working with the police, and as the community feels empowered, starting to make sure that as situations are getting addressed, that they can maintain what's going on, the success they had, but also knowing that they have direct contact with officers that are going to come respond, that they could trust, they've built relationships with over time. So that's, I guess, a very quick thumbnail sketch of what the model looks like. It has very specific guiding principles. Unlike where we see community policing that has many different meanings, when you talk to 10 different people about community policing, they'll give you 10 different definitions of what it is. Neighborhood-based policing is very structured. It's really designed to do all this activity engaged in building trust and confidence in the police. And it's really about collaborative relationships and partnerships and geographic boundaries, and making sure officers have the time to spend with the community and not just run from call to call to call. So that you really, what you're doing is you're really being very thoughtful about how you're using your officers. It's the officers that are patrol officers that are delivering the service in the first place, but now your entire patrol operations engaged, which also means everything else that's involved, whether it continues to be flex teams, if they still exist or not, or it becomes the detective units and things like that, work in coordination and collaboration with those neighborhood coordinating officers. So when something happens, you just don't have a tactical team coming into a neighborhood and causing disruption. It's through consultation with the neighborhood coordinating officers that they'll operate, and they operate in a very specific, defined role and manner. And then when that work is done, they leave. It's part of the overall problem-solving strategies, and then you move in with other partners to help deal with and address the issues that are going on within that particular neighborhood. Those things are tracked. How you count things are very different in the neighborhood-based policing model. The center core of the principal measurement is community sentiment. The whole goal here is the community has to feel safe, has to be able to trust the police, and it's their opinions and perceptions of their public safety and their quality of life issues that matter. And the police have to respond, and that's what they're being held accountable to, and how that community feels about the police response and how they're engaging with the police. The other outcomes are things like crime reduction, but also quality of life issues and problem-solving techniques that they're using to resolve issues long-term, and they're being held accountable for that. And then the third bucket is the things that you measure internally, both in terms of your time off the radio, what we call geographic integrity, also benchmarks in terms of identifying when you start to see disparities. Why are those disparities existing in terms of enforcement? And looking at it very closely and trying to identify what the causation for it is, and making sure that you catch it early and you're not waiting for something to manifest itself into something else that's damaging to the community and causing that kind of collateral damage. So it's really requiring the police department to hold themselves accountable, but also be very transparent in letting you know how those measurements count and what they count for. And they all are about outcome measures, and they're all about tangible support. It's all connected directly to the model. So you don't see what we call in New York stick counting. We're not counting how many arrests we make. We're not counting how many citations we issue. We're not counting X, Y, or Z, number of events we hold and things like that. What we're looking at is holistically, how are we addressing issues? The community has identified priorities, how we're responding to those priorities, and how quickly we're resolving those issues to the satisfaction of the community.
You've tried this in Louisville, is that correct?
We've done a major key strategy. We're working that now in Louisville. I'm working right now. I've been working in Chicago now for the last 3 years, and we're working in 5 districts and actually taking that model and putting it into 5 districts in Chicago. It's a takeoff from the New York City Police Department model, which we expanded greatly, and actually built the community engagement piece of the component of the model, much more than what New York is doing right now. So that they've shown some very significant early successes. We've had Northwestern University come in and do the evaluation on the model. So it's all through NYU School of Law Policing Project that we're operating, and we've been working in that area. We're having conversations with other jurisdictions about the model and actually thinking about how policing could take on a very different role and a very different mission.
How do you decide the size? Is it based on geographic size, or is it based on population size? The scope of the area you do this in?
It's a number of combinations. So it's about the intensity of what the issues are that you're trying to address. It's about the size of the population. It's also about the social cohesion within a neighborhood. If I have got a larger geographic area, there's a lot of social cohesion, I can accomplish a lot more. If I have got concentrated areas that have been neglected and disadvantaged, I really need to shrink those areas because I need to take the time to start to build that social organization and social cohesion. I need the community to be actively involved. I need to hear from the community. But if they're too frightened to even talk to me, or they're too frightened to talk to you because they're afraid of what the neighbors are going to say, then it can't work. So that's what you saw with collective efficacy, was really starting to build that kind of social organization and safety for the members in that community so they can actually start to speak out and actually collaborate with the police and having those kinds of conversations.
Does this model typically require more police officers or less? When you have budgetary constraints, I know in the long run, I can see how this would definitely save money. But in the short term, does this require more police? So what will tend to happen in the very beginning of the process is an investment, right? In terms of, and again, what you're thinking about is how do you do this? And our recommendation, quite honestly, you do this in pilot areas, just like we did with collective efficacy.
work in an area, put the resources there where you need them, see how they work, see what you need in terms of actual resources to make those kinds of changes that you want to see, and then be guided by it. I'm a firm believer in investment and proven returns, right? If you're going to invest something, you need to know what you're investing in. You also need to know what you're going to get out of that investment. And then it's up to the community to figure out, is that investment worth it, right? And so when you start to hear a lot of conversations about defunding the police and things like that, you really don't know what you're taking away from the police. And what I'm afraid is going to happen a lot of times, if you shrink the police mission too small and force them to that corner being law enforcement agents, that doesn't help anything. If you expand them, let them think of themselves as a larger social service network, and social justice is their primary goal, and criminal justice is a small portion of what they do, which they do anyway. If you think about the amount of work the police do right now, they spend a disproportionate amount of time in things that are not related to law enforcement activities, but those are the things that are causing the greatest amount of harm in the community. So what you want to do is, as they get better in terms of being able to engage the community, work with the community, the reliance on law enforcement tactics shrinks greatly over time. So it's a sliding scale. So I think to answer that question, you really have to try it in some areas. You have to experiment with it in some areas, see what you need in terms of resources. It even means taking resources from other places in the department to support this initiative, and then making a clear assessment. Okay, this is what I need to do if I'm going to replicate the scan in a precinct. Plus, every jurisdiction is different. So what we're doing in Chicago it has its own hallmarks and its own things going on, but it's different than New York. So you have to make sure what you're doing is it fits with the community values, it fits with what the community wants from the police, and that it's being responsive to that community. And it's just not a model you just keep on replicating over and over again. So in the first year, we spent working in 2 districts, understanding how this model worked before we started to go into other districts.
Okay, so it's a rapid response, rapid response, sector officers and neighborhood coordinating officers. That's kind of the breakdown.
Those are the 3 tiers.
Yeah,
and that involves, that involves everybody in patrol. Every patrol officer working is in one of those 3 tiers.
Okay, the rapid response, is that more of the traditional U.S. policing office? Is that what that is?
No, so what happens is as you go into the model, you start to identify those calls that really are specific to the neighborhood, specific to neighborhood problems, and the officers who go to those calls are the sector officers. Rapid response officers are handling the motor vehicle accidents, the details, minor calls that take a lot of time from officers, so they're actually handling those calls to service, while the sector officers and the neighborhood coordinating officers are focusing on their geographic areas, focusing on their neighborhoods. But meanwhile, all those other things that take away from the police time, that's where you get to that 30% of what we call uncommitted time or off the radio, because you have these other officers that are responding to those lesser calls. And also serving as a backup when you need to have support in terms of those sector officers. But the sector officers basically are driving the situations because it's their neighborhoods. And what you get out of that is a sense of ownership of that area. What officers start to build over time is job satisfaction, and they start to feel responsible for what's going on in their geographic areas because that's where they work all the time. So you actually start to see not only external approval or trust of the police, but then you start to see that because you're empowering your officers, that same type of thing happening internally inside the organization.
Hey, John, first a comment and a question. The comment is, you said you talk fast, and you sure do. And we had a guy from New Jersey who is a financial advisor for our endowment. And in the very first meeting, he came in and he started talking like this. I said, wait. We talk slow, but we listen fast. And I've been listening fast, and I'm learning a lot from you. What I need to kind of, I'm always looking for a way to take communities, for example, community sentiment and crime, and put them side by side and show how they affect one another. Is there some sort of metric that's used to go out and sell this idea? I mean, I think it's a marvelous thought.
No, I think it's important that you can, and it's really going to be important for the administration of the police department to be able to articulate this very clearly to the community. But what's going to be equally important is as they articulate it to the community, that they actually start to make the model happen so people can start to see it. And the thing is, when they start seeing an officer coming up to you and handing you their business card so that you can call an officer directly, then you know it's real, because now what you're doing is you're backing up what you're saying you're going to do with actually the action you're doing. And what was interesting in Chicago, within 13 months, what Northwestern did is they had a control district that was very similar to 25, and then they had District 25. And so what Northwestern was doing is they were treating it like a quasi-experiment. And they were watching to see what was happening in terms of their crime numbers, in terms of what they call RAPs, which is their stack calls, because they just couldn't keep the calls they were doing. But they also, more importantly, they were measuring community sentiment through Elucid and other methods of surveying the community. And they saw this one district that had the highest amount of reduction in backup calls, had the highest increase in terms of community sentiment, while the other community that we were comparing to really was starting to shrink and going down, and also saw a significant reduction in their violent crime over time. And their calls for service overall decreased. So there's a variety of different measures that you use to kind of figure out, in fact, are you having impact? What is the impact you're having? But we also saw the calls that were diverted back to the neighborhood coordinating officers was going up. People were relying upon those officers and reaching out to those officers, and those officers were coordinating and making sure that people got connected to the services they wanted to. And that it got to a point where our community ambassadors, which is the other community component of this model, really put some hard expectations on these officers, and giving them credit, they responded to it, but they also enjoyed the work they were doing because they had the relationships. They saw something from the very beginning to the end, which police officers typically don't get a chance to do. You go to a call for service and then you go away, right? And then maybe 2 weeks later, you come back to that same household and the situation is exactly the same or worse, and nobody intervened in the meantime to support the folks. The other thing I didn't get into is that these officers also become an extension of your investigative unit. They actually are the ones that go back in and provide services and make sure the community or the residents that are victimized are getting the service they need, their well-being, checking on them, and then making sure that they can feel safe in their homes while the detectives continue to do their work. One of the frustrations a lot of people have is that they're a victim of crime, it goes into investigations, and you may or may not hear again back from the police, right? Where you're reaching out to this, you're not reaching out to the detective, you're reaching out to these coordinating officers or neighborhood coordinating officers and asking what's going on with my crime, or providing those officers with additional information that goes back to the detectives to help increase the solvability of those cases. So these officers take on a lot of responsibility, but it's amazing how much they can accomplish by not having that direct connection with the community and working with the community.
Sharon, thank you so much for asking that question about budget. As we all know, our budgetary situation right now is very restricted, and the idea of hiring new officers right now is not feasible. So I guess my question is, can you explain how the program in New York or in Chicago partnered with social service organizations, and how that was a way to help bridge the gap while we're, waiting and wanting to hire new officers, but maybe that's a way that we could phase in the program or start the program now.
Right. And as I described the model is going to change over time, because what you're going to see as we start to empower other social service agencies, other social service providers, other community-based organizations, then you don't need the police to be actively engaged in that. So over time, and to Ms. Robinson's question, what they saw in New York is that the need for officers shrunk within precincts while the crime rates went down, because they stabilized the community and the community became more actively involved in terms of being part of that shared responsibilities of public safety and quality of life. The need for police officers actually shrunk a little bit. So they were starting to put themselves out of business a little bit. So I think what you'll see over time is they're working with the communities. The same thing they're doing is identifying what all the resources are. And you saw a little bit of that with Clinton and 40th Street when they started to see the lunch programs coming into the neighborhoods, which never came into the neighborhoods before. So kids could actually get lunch while they were in their own neighborhoods, connecting kids to other day programs and engagement programs in a church that was really nearby, but the parents were too afraid to let their kids leave the neighborhood. But with time, they were able now getting those kids over there, and they were engaged in other activities and really starting to build that network. And where you see the police really being useful as that front end and follow-up end is you're actually empowering those organizations as well, because those folks during counting, whether it's a mental health issue or an addiction issue, they're living in the neighborhood. They're not going to go away. So I'm checking in with them to see how they're doing. I've built a relationship with them. And if they really don't feel that they're getting the kind of service they need, or if they start to slip a little bit, I'm the first one there to kind of catch them and get them reconnected, right? So it's not about trying to catch them doing something wrong, but it's really about trying to make sure they're getting the service they need, that they're thriving with the community, their quality of life is improving, and that when they do need help, I'm the one who helps them figure out where they need to go. Because you can imagine, just if you don't know anything about an organization and you need mental health services, some agencies will only service a certain clientele or a certain catchment area. You don't know that, right? You just kind of reach out and hope you're going to get somebody. What I'm connected to are people inside those organizations. The neighborhood coordinating officers not only make referrals, but they are connected, and vice versa. So those folks that are in those social service agencies have those officers' numbers, and they're communicating with each other all the time. So I can get you past the receptionist, I can get you into the agency and make sure that I'm actually getting to the right place and you're not hitting a brick wall. Because that's very frustrating, especially if you're in crisis. You have little ability to be able to get disappointment after disappointment, but you really need to get the help. And these officers are there to make sure you get connected to the kinds of service you need, and then checking in with you and seeing how things are going. And
so is it more proactive, or like, for example,
it's more early intervention. It's more early intervention and more prevention. And what tends to happen with those sector officers I talked about, as they start to see problems and encounter problems, I'm going to a household where a man is hallucinating, and I have to go back an hour later. Who am I calling? I'm calling my neighborhood coordinating officer, who's going to pay a visit to that gentleman or that woman and say, what do you need for services? How do you need help? And then making sure I get connected services to that person. So that what I'm doing basically is improving their quality of life and taking them out of crisis. Stop them from suffering, right?
And Robert, you're disappearing. I don't know if that's it's great. I didn't want to say anything.
Blacking out.
Is it getting too dark?
Yes.
The sun's going down on you.
I'm on the East Coast. So.
You use the clapper.
let me turn the light on. Hang on for a second.
I noticed that there's not an option to type in questions. John, is that because we are using WebEx? But in terms of process, Sharon and Judge Blocker, it'd be great to figure that out so we can take more questions. But Robert, this is Juliana. I'm the Executive Director at Connection Americas, and this is a great presentation, but I've spent a lot of time in New York and Chicago, and Nashville is very different from Chicago. When we think about public transportation, access to community serving organizations, the fact that kids can walk from home to a CBO or even have access to the police in Chicago. In some communities it works, but I would love for us to contextualize it in Nashville. And what does it mean to talk about the realities? I'm here in Nolensville Pike, and what you're describing sounds great in theory for a Nashville that I would love to see next year, in the next 5 years. But that's not the reality that we live in. So that's my first question. And my second question, I think Sharon alluded to this, the rapid response team. These are the new individuals, the ones that it seems to me, you said that they were just charged with the rapid response, but it seems to me that they're also the most inexperienced. So what kind of training do they get? Because typically the individuals, and correct me if I'm wrong, that our community interacts with are with the rapid response. So if they are the first folks that are getting in touch with, but sector officers who are the second tier are making the decisions, I just see a huge disconnect there. But let's go back to context, and then second, recruitment.
So remember what I said, that what's going to be really critically important is setting up your pilot district or your pilot precincts. You need to see how it's going to work in Nashville. So I can tell you the conceptual constructs of the model, but in order to really evaluate the model, you've got to see it in practice. And you also have to make sure that you also understand their mindset is very different. They're no longer thinking as law enforcement officers. They're thinking themselves as public safety officers engaged with other partners and working through a process. Some of your precincts are very, very large, like the West Precinct. And I'm trying to grapple with how do you start to make sure that you have enough police representation so that you maintain that geographic ownership and that geographic connection, so that you can have the frequent kinds of contact you have. Don't confuse rapid response with the flex teams. Rapid response are not just junior officers, but they're also senior officers who don't want to be assigned to a geographic area, who don't want to be responsible for being a neighborhood coordinating officer. So there's a mix of senior and junior officers working together. But again, as they're being trained, they're trained in terms of what their responsibilities are. They still have to go through their field training officer program. And so, and also remember that they're primarily handling low-level calls for service, right? It's your sector officers, your core officers that are the ones that are addressing the issues that are related to their neighborhoods. So they're still going on calls for service. What you're trying to do is get them some time off the radio so they can also meet with the community, engage with the community, and also do some of the problem-solving initiatives that are agreed upon between the neighborhood coordinating officers and the community that they're working in. So it's different. I grant you that. I don't want you thinking that because it's going on in New York and Chicago, it's going to look very different in Nashville. But the principles and the construct of the model are all in place. Remember I said about the guiding principles in terms of transparency, trust, confidence in the police, and the measurements that you're using to assess whether the police are being successful or not. And it's all community-based. It's the community that basically speaks about how they feel about the police. It's a community who speaks about their perception of public safety. It's a community that speaks about their perception of quality of life, and are they getting the kind of service they need, and then for the police to listen and respond in kind, and also get the resources that are needed to support the community in what it wants. And ultimately what it turns into being is the community saying to the police, this is how we want our neighborhoods to be policed. And it'll be different across neighborhoods. And so that's why it's so important those same officers stay within those particular neighborhoods so they understand what the community wants and desires and priorities are and responding to them in kind. So it's not a matter of the police providing their own brand of policing. It's really understanding what the community wants and responding in kind to what the community is saying it wants in terms of that kind of intervention and engagement with the police. I don't know, did I answer your question, or did I kind of walk around the question?
Fair enough. And then I just had a question about representation and recruiting folks that look like the communities that we serve. Again, in Chicago and other cities, you can have second, third generation immigrant origin individuals that look like the officers. But here, at least in our community, we still have a lot of work to do to ensure that they even speak the same language. So that's another piece that I would love for us to spend more time talking
So
in.
also understand that you're going to now be attracting people with different skill sets than we traditionally attract in terms of police officers, because it's not about crime fighting, it's not doing the traditional forms of policing, and those so forth. What you've got to really start to look at is who are the right people to do this kind of work? Where do I need to go to recruit those kinds of folks to get into and really engage them? So when we talk about this notion of community engagement and trust, those same types of elements have to exist inside the organization. And that's what I talked about, inverting the organization, empowering those officers. This generation wants to be more engaged. This generation wants to be able to not just be told what to do. And the notion of a paramilitary organization does not fit with this model at all. So it's about the internal supervisory staff, management staff, supporting officers, guiding officers, directing officers, holding officers accountable, but not being overly disciplinary, not giving them orders, not being over directive in terms of doing them, but supporting them in terms of what they need. So it's those officers coming back to their supervisor and saying, this is what I need in terms of resources, this is what I need in terms of support. And it's a supervisor's job to support them that way.
Robert, I'm glad that you brought up the topic of the skill set, because that was my question. It seems like what you described as real policing and the model that you have been discussing seems, seems very effective and holistic and makes sense. But there are two different models, and there are two different skill sets of the people who can do those things well. So then also understanding that there are severe financial constraints on the city right now, and the existing police force is the existing police force. You know, if you were, having been chief of police, if you were to step into the role, if you imagine yourself becoming the chief of police in Nashville and undertaking this kind of reform of what policing even means, how do you do that with the skill sets of people on the existing force where you're introducing? Is this something that can be trained? Is this or as for a chief of police to come in and enact this kind of reform, how is that done with limited resources and existing structure?
So my recommendation is to do exactly that, that you don't start to make a heavy investment into something you haven't seen yet. And so what I'm saying to you is, as you start to think about the organization, you think about the resource you have in your organizations, I'll tell you right now, you're not going to find a lot of officers that are going to have the skill set you need for neighborhood coordinating officers. In fact, in an organization of 13,000 police officers, they had 30 officers apply for that position. The officers that applied for those positions were remarkable in terms of that, having that kind of skill set and really being devoted and committed to it. So it requires a lot of training. Those officers get trained not just in terms of what their role is in terms of being neighborhood coordinating officers, but they get trained in mediation, they get trained in conflict resolution, they get trained in crisis intervention techniques. So you're building their skill set. And what you think about it is you're creating a career path within the organization. So those newer officers or those officers that rapid response, the goal is to get a large percentage of them as they learn their business to move into that sector officer position. And for those sector officer positions, move into neighborhood coordinating officers. And then for those neighborhood coordinating officers, becoming your next supervisors or next set of detectives. So there's a career path that actually is rewarding to the officers as they move through the organization. Police chief, if I was going to come in there, I would say to the community, let me show you what I can do with this model. And then you decide whether you're getting the kinds of returns from the way we're doing this, keeping in mind we're doing it in smaller areas or picking a precinct to work on as a model, investing the resource I have currently to show you that it is a different way and it actually does give you a greater yield of return and also is consistent with the community wants. And then go back to the community and say, okay, if I need to do this because now I understand the model better, I know how it works in Nashville, this is what we need to do to start to roll out over a number of years. You can't do it in the course of a year. It's going to be a 5-year strategy with a vision in mind of what you want to try to accomplish and working towards that vision with milestones connected every year into that multi-year strategy, including your investments and returns being identified within that strategy that you're holding the police chief accountable to. Making this investment is what I'm getting in returns. I'm going to say I'm going to get in returns. Before I make any more investments, I got to make sure you can deliver on what you say you're going to provide for us if I make the investment in the organization.
I have a few questions along those similar lines. Those are some fantastic questions. I really appreciate Juliana talking about diversity in the police force. I really also appreciate you saying working yourself out of a job, right? Because that keeps your goal in mind. We want to be safe, right? Like that's where we want to be. We're all safe. We don't need police because we're safe, right? Like working our way to have that goal in mind. I know I've said that before and people are like, that's crazy, but that's where we want to shoot for, right? It'll take us forever to get there, but we need to keep that goal. So I have a few questions as I was listening to you. Number one, there's 3 of them. One I think has been addressed, but it was really kind of what then happens to all of the special units. So we have numerous special units, but I think you're addressing kind of those will go in over time to this 3-tiered system. Is that correct?
They'll shrink over time.
The second question, sorry, go ahead.
So what happened in New York became over-specialized in the precincts. And what they did is they took away a lot of their specialized units and put officers back in uniform and got a net gain of 20% of the officers within the precinct. Chicago, basically, they have large tactical teams that were really doing a lot of havoc in the community, and they're starting to shrink in the pilot district, shrinking those tactical teams. They don't need 42 officers in a tactical team any longer, because those officers are now migrating back into a patrol function. So as I said before, the mission of the police department is patrol operations, it's the core mission. And what we tend to do in many police departments is pull people out into specialties, and patrol becomes like a secondary consideration where it's the core of what you're delivering in terms of police services. So you're changing the focus of the organization back into patrol, and everybody in patrol is doing the same mission. They don't have these specialized missions. And those specialized units are supportive to what the neighborhood coordinating officers are and what patrol is doing. So they're actually supporting what's going on in patrol as opposed to the other way around, where patrol is giving cases to detectives and never hear from them again, things like that.
The second question is really building on what David says, which we had a community engagement officer, a Sergeant Picanzo, on our last call, and he was talking about the really pinpointing difficulty of making sure you get the people with the right skill set to be in these positions, or you can damage the community. So I'm wrestling with the question of, if the skill set is not there, right, with the way that we currently had people, and we have, again, back to Juliana's question, 75% of the police force is white male, there's a lot of turning that needs to happen. And how do we get that turning? And then finally, related to that question, you talked about it being social services or social justice. I believe you used those terms.
Right.
When I think of social, my wife is a social worker. She's got 4 years bachelor's and years graduate, master's degree, and an LCS and a doctorate. Where is the role for social workers in this instead of trying to train a police officer to be a social worker, right? That may take a big, heavy lift. Could we do the lift in a different way, utilizing strengths that are already there? Does that make sense?
It does. And let me just give you an example of what I did in Cambridge. So what we started doing as I started to have vacancies in the department, I actually brought MSWs into the police department. Not to do direct services, but to support the officers who are doing the work out in the field, because their mindset, the way they think about things is very different than the way police officers did. And what you started to see is a very different way of how the police started to engage with the community. That was not, and everything we did also connected back to other social services. So we were supporting them, but we also had those internal resources that we needed to make sure that we were moving in the right direction and that we were actually delivering the kinds of services and thinking about our roles very differently. And that's the hardest thing for people to kind of grapple is it's a very different mindset about this model than the way officers traditionally think about the way they were indoctrinated as police officers, right? We train our officers to think a very specific way, which has not always been helpful to the communities. And it's really about retraining, rethinking about how you train officers, bringing new people with new skill sets, but also making sure you have support within the organization that's going to help you think about problems very differently. And with those MSWs became key resources to the officers when they came to them with some very intractable, difficult problems and trying to figure out how's the best way to deal with that. In some cases, the MSWs went out with the officers, but that wasn't to the exclusion of the other agencies. It was just helping them try to figure out how to diagnose the situation correctly and making sure they get people to connect the right services, if that makes sense. But then also forcing other agencies to actually be more engaged with the police as a partner, right? As opposed to being siloed or separate. So you may have agencies that have the ability to do some direct services and working in tandem with the police, not necessarily being next to the police when they go there, but actually being supportive and also talking to each other. What was interesting in our roundtables is we would talk about, and this is about our juvenile intervention programs, about cases, but we were actually giving information back to child psychologists in terms of what they were manifesting and what they were doing in the community, because all the child psychologist says is that 15 minutes when the child's there. We were giving context. He wasn't telling us anything about the clients, and he was maintaining confidentiality and HIPAA regulations. But that kind of relationship and that kind of trust we built over time, including with the schools in terms of our engagement with the schools, and what the officers did in the schools was not your typical SRO program. It was very different. They were really there to build a relationship with the kids, be supportive of kids, mentor kids, and then when kids needed help, you also were there as a resource to them.
Okay, I'm going to ask everybody's mute to sound again, please. We're getting too much feedback. And it's now David's turn. David is going to tell us, thank you so much, Robert. David is going to tell us about the data committee.
Well, I had a question.
Yeah.
I need to stop. We need to stop right now. We've got to switch to David.
Judge, I'm happy to go, though I will say that I've allocated 20 minutes on the agenda, and I won't need that long, but I'm happy to go in whatever order what you'd like.
How long do you think you need?
I think 10 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to hear Larry's question?
Let's hear Larry's question, then we'll go to David.
Robert, because it appears that Robert is going to advocate for the community.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what you're hearing.
That's what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Okay, so if the community say that they want to get rid of poverty, homelessness, low wages, broken families, and unjust laws, how would the police help them on that?
So there would be an added voice to what the community needs. A lot of those things are much larger in terms of the kinds of issues and the kinds of resources that are needed to support the community. But they actually advocate for folks more so on an individual basis in terms of making sure that they're getting what they need in terms of their own personal services, delivery services. But they're also advocates in terms of understanding what is causing some of the issues within a community. And if they really are going to be effective in their jobs, have to be a voice with the community that's in concert with the community in terms of supporting the needs and what the community is advocating for. What tends to happen and what gets lost is the folks that need the services the most are often the ones that aren't listened to, don't really have a voice, that are kind of marginalized. And it's really about that notion of empowerment of neighborhoods and communities that are really important. So that's where you start to see the return in terms of communities feeling empowered, that they can now come together and speak with a voice in terms of what they need, and they're being listened to, starting with the police and then with the other people that are involved in terms of providing those kinds of services going forward.
So you don't think that so you don't feel that the community can take the lead?
Has to take the lead. That's what we're striving for. It's the community that has to take the lead, and the police are there to support the community. That's where it changes the relationship. Before, the police are telling you what they're going to provide you in terms of police services, and you just got to accept it. That's not what this model is about. This model is about listening to the community, what its needs are, what its priorities are, and it's the community that's driving the kinds of things that it needs and having the voice that it needs to be able to be heard.
Yeah, but it seems like the only time you all are coming in is after a crime has taken place, okay. But crimes come from ills that plague the community, poverty and things of that nature. So if we can take care of the social ills, then perhaps we won't have any crimes.
You'll see crime go down drastically, yes. You'll have safer communities. Because it's those things about class distinctions, basically not having the same access to the various different things a lot of people have that we all take for granted, and making sure that those things are now being invested in the communities that have been neglected for so long, so that they can start to thrive, right? But it's that community that's saying to the police, this is what we want you to do in terms of policing services in our neighborhood, and it starts there, because it's about the notion of urgency, and it can't be something that, if you're going to wait for the more global issues, the larger issues to be fixed, you're going to be waiting for a long period of time. But there are people that are suffering right now that need services that are being neglected, and it's really the police that are really starting to connect folks to those kinds of services that start to improve their quality of life, but also start to make them feel empowered.
Because I know we had a situation at Paul's Market on Jefferson Street, and I think one of the employees shot at a community member. They shot at him and they pistol whipped him. Us at I'm with Gideon's Army. We went up there to the store and we spoke to the owner. We didn't like his response, so we got with the beer and beverage committee, and we had their beer license taken. But prior to their beer license getting taken, they was getting up to like 1,700 phone calls a month at that store. But once the beer license got took, they was barely getting, 100. Well, probably 50. But I say all that to say that it don't always have to be you got to come in, want to take people away from the community or to strip families from mothers and fathers in the community, when we do have social ills that dictate crime. It's like we reactionary.
And that's what the police are up to this point in time. If you think about it, they're responding and reacting to calls of service. They're reacting to calls of service, and yet you have 1,700 calls to a location, and nobody did anything about to stop it, right? What the police have to do is they have to start to understand that these are locations that basically are the source of some problems, figure out what's driving those problems, and just as you described as one of the techniques is maybe lift their liquor license and stabilize that location so that folks aren't in jeopardy, folks aren't in danger because of the things that have manifested themselves over time at that one particular location, and because maybe the store owner wasn't responsible enough to manage the store correctly, that you needed to kind of neutralize the situation. But it's that kind of work that goes on every day in terms of not just waiting for things to erupt, but starting to get in front of things before they start to become too dangerous for the community. In the beginning, it's going to be a little dicey because it's a matter of catch-up. But once you start to see the model taking hold, you start to see that those kinds of repetitive types of things aren't occurring over and over again any longer. That as soon as the situation starts to manifest itself or evolve, the police are figuring out what's going on here and how do we start to make sure that we engage early on to stop it before it starts to manifest itself to a place where now you have shootings going on inside that establishment.
Thanks.
Okay, David, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Judge. And thanks for the opportunity to update the committee, just to remind the committee what each of the three committees has designated someone to serve on this working group. And the purpose is to establish a baseline of information, which is numerical data and policies and procedures that we think will be useful and inform all three of the substantive committees' work. And it gives us, the intent is to make sure that we have a baseline of data that the entire commission is working off of. So the data working group is not an independent group. We are providing information to all of the committees so that everyone is on the same page. We had our first meeting on Tuesday. The representative from the policy committee is Bilal. The representative from the workforce committee is Daryl Talbert. And our initial meeting was led by or facilitated by Dia Cirillo. We also had Dr. Peter Valier, who is the lead researcher for the community oversight, and Matt Morley, who is a data scientist at MNPD. It was a very productive meeting, a small enough group that we could establish priorities and figure out how in short order within the next month we can amass the data information that will be useful to our committees. There are two areas that we are focused on. One is policies and procedures, a comprehensive set of the written documents, the governing documents, the bulletins, the policies, the procedures, goals and objectives, records that are kept by MNPD that we can put together and evaluate and present to our committee and others for use in our work. And I think through that part of what the data working group is doing, we should be able to provide information, but also highlight areas that this committee may want to look at in terms of vulnerable populations and where there are improvements or recommended improvements that can be made in procedures. The second main focus of what the data working group has undertaken are to come up with key performance indicators, a sort of dashboard of police data that will be a marker for improvements that this commission may recommend to the incoming police chief. So what exactly is it that we are measuring? Where are we? And how will we know that we have achieved success or improvements? And so the data working group is working with Dr. Valier from community oversight and with Matt Morley, the data scientist at the police department, to come up with what we will recommend to the committees as metrics that we should pay attention to. And that will be subject to this committee and every other committee's evaluation of whether those are the right metrics, whether there are things that need to be changed, other things we need to look at. But our task, as we understand it, is to make proposals about key performance indicators to the members of the different committees for use in our making recommendations. So we have had one, it was an active meeting. We're going to meet weekly as this committee meets. And as I said, our goal is approximately 4 weeks from now, we'll be prepared to present to this committee and to others, on one hand, the policies and procedures and analysis of those, and on the other hand, or secondly, a set of key performance indicators that will guide how we measure success.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Would you like to read lead the discussion on recommendations?
And I've been looking at how we can go about really organizing our thoughts. And I wanted to start and level set where we are now, but starting off with the global issues that we've covered. We have learned that community policing that we know that we're very much interested in is defined in so many different ways. We have seen how it works in some parts of Nashville, but today we've learned about this neighborhood-based policing model. And so we need to also look globally at whether or not we are asking police to do some things that might be better suited for others to handle, because we put everything in that police basket. And that's something that I think we've talked about the edge of, whether or not some of the things that police officers are charged with, we should look at alternatives, so to speak. Also, we have had discussions that relate to this idea of community trust because we do know that in order to move us from where we are now to where we want to be, these neighborhoods will have to trust the police, and both the community policing model and the neighborhood-based policing model all have to have that level of trust created within the community, which will come about, I think, if we have a level of police accountability. Now, we haven't had anyone to talk to us from the Community Oversight Board. Frankly, I don't know how much authority they will really have in the process, but some of the things that we need to address are this level of trust and accountability of the police officers. Also, at the end of the day, I don't think that anyone would question the need for safety. And I think that goes throughout all these conversations, that people want to feel safe in their homes and their neighborhoods. I don't care where they are. And we charge the police with this, but we also have to look at whether or not there are alternatives. I think, are going to have to at some point acknowledge that there are violent circumstances, and maybe this is because I deal with people every day that have been in violent circumstances, where you need what is closer to traditional policing, and that's something we need to discuss as a group. Is there a role for this traditional policing within all of these models? Now, you can do a lot of things that prevent violence from happening. You can do a lot of social services so that we won't have this. But I think that at the end of the day, we will have a role for police to respond to very violent situations. The question is whether or not we can resolve some of these interpersonal conflicts, public health issues such as drug and alcohol addictions, also the mental health crisis that we see. Maybe that's a role where we do not need the traditional policing model, and we need to, and we've had discussions around that. Also, I think that we have not discussed this so far, but in some of our vulnerable areas, we're going to have to look at accountability to those specific vulnerable areas. Now, where we are so far, last week we heard from an officer as well as representatives of the Dream Center from the West Precinct. And that was really, I think, one of the ways that you can define community policing. And we heard from them. And they also brought about an issue that we discussed last week as well as this week. This collective efficacy was introduced. And that concept of empowering the community to hold themselves accountable. And that's something I think we need to flesh out and decide whether or not we want to have some recommendations around that whole idea of empowering the community, because I do believe that when you give people a level of power, that if nothing else, they can make decisions as a collective that actually make their neighborhood safer. We have looked at vulnerable populations. We've had 2 different lunch and learns. The reason we had those lunch and learns is we believe those topics relate to all 3 of the subcommittees of the Policing Policy Commission. The first one identified mental health, violence, mental health, pre-arrest diversion. And if you have not listened to that one, I think it's recorded. John can correct me. But anyone that wasn't able to be a part of that conversation needs to look at that, because really what it does is show us some alternative things that are already in place in Nashville for those who are in a mental health crisis. The second was the lunch and learn yesterday, and this is about victims of interpersonal violence and our Family Safety Center, the Sexual Assault Center, and also the YWCA's relationship with the LAP, Lethality Assessment Program, with police officers. And these are programs that exist now. And we were talking just a few minutes ago about how we have police officers and social workers working together. And we actually have that here in Nashville on issues of interpersonal violence. Social workers have been introduced within the police force to not only work with the officers and helping them understand what is going on with these victims, but also to shore up the officers as they suffer trauma in some of the work that they do. So there is a definite role for the social worker skill set within the police force. Of course, we have on our agenda to meet with the Metro Public School System. That's one of our groups that we have to look at. We have some other vulnerable populations that we have not had any sort of education about so far. Glad to see the data committee established. That was definitely on my wish list going into this, because we are supposed to have results from this study that are evidence-based. And in evidence-based, you have to have the data. You have to show that some of these things work. We have to work within the budgetary constraints that we have. So we don't want to recommend something that's so out there that we can't even implement it at all, because we just simply are not going to have the funding today or tomorrow. And also, we need to have on our agenda the Community Oversight Board, because we need to see whether or not there's any teeth to that, to see whether or not that is one mechanism to have this community engagement and accountability. I think those are my big buckets. Those are things that I wanted to make sure that we're able to report out about. But I didn't know if there's something that I'm leaving out, or something that someone feels needs to be in that big bucket list, or someone, I know we have several on our agendas as far as vulnerable populations we'll hear from, but we do have a set time frame in order to come up with some information. By our next meeting, I'll have some sort of draft recommendations. I'll of course get to Judge Blackburn first, and then we'll work from there to see where we go. But does anyone have any concerns about this sort of direction, or the things that we've heard from, or have something that we absolutely need to address that wasn't part of that bigger picture?
We've not heard a peep from Tom Turner tonight. Let's just call him out.
I'm here. I had some questions for Mr. Haas, but we ran out of time. I might track him down later.
Well, he's still on the thing. You can ask him now. We've got a second if you want to ask him.
I do. I was curious if the community policing operation that we have going on here is similar to the neighborhood policing without the structure of neighborhood policing. Some of the principles appear very similar. And to me, the best intention of community policing is carried forward in neighborhood policing with additional structure and protocol. Is that a fair assessment?
So what typically happens, and what's happening in Nashville, is you've relegated that responsibility to a smaller group of officers. And so what you have is what we consider a bifurcated way of policing. You have one group of officers who are dedicated to building relationships with the community, trying to run events, trying to improve the community. It tends to be more of a community relations type of effort. Meanwhile, you have other officers that are doing things that are actually counter to what the community really wants in terms of this level of enforcement. What the model proposes is not making this a specialized side unit, but becoming the principal focus of the entire police department, where everything in the department, including those external units, are supporting that initiative, as opposed to your community policing efforts being one of those side units and really supporting patrol and not really fully engaged, and therefore you don't have officers that are doing the same type of work. And what you really want to do is have a centralized mission of policing and not have this bifurcated approach of policing that takes place in many, many communities.
And have that structure.
Right.
The second question, I know you were in Cambridge for a bit. Is there any relevance to use of force statistics that you might have gathered over the years in Cambridge? And I don't know if I'm using the right term, but did your, what I'll just call in my mind, negative encounters with the community as far as policing and all the police activities, did that change over time?
It diminished over time because we were using other skills. We were training our officers in crisis intervention techniques. We were teaching them in terms of mediation and conflict resolution, and really equipping our officers with other skills that they didn't need to rely upon conventional, traditional police methods in terms of engaging people and understanding how they didn't get drawn into a situation, and that this whole notion of controlling a situation as opposed to managing a situation, very different in terms of walking into a situation where you have police officers that are shouting a bunch of orders and somebody's already in crisis. And what happens to that situation? It escalates, right? And so what happens, the officer is actually unwittingly contributing to the need to use force to now bring it back down again. and really teaching officers to use a very different technique in terms of trying to get folks to calm down, understand what the issues are that are going on in that neighborhood, and take a very different approach in trying to manage the situation in a way that gets a successful outcome and not need to rely upon the other tactics we used in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just hearing this, I think that knowing that use of force statistics have a tendency to drop or go in a direction that we might all be in favor of, and the crime rate goes down, and we're talking about affording it, it almost sounds like we can't afford not to do something similar to a model that you're discussing. I don't know what everybody else thinks on the committee, but I don't know if we have to focus so much on the cost of doing it as opposed to the cost of not doing it.
I agree with you. However, being on the council and seeing the budgets and knowing what we're dealing with right now, we just can't afford the investment right now. But I do agree that we need to look at how we can start phasing in this model with our current resources. And then down the line, making that investment later. And Sharon, I had a quick question, and I may have missed it. On your list of recommendations, did you have in there about the school resource officers, the SRO, and how they work?
Yes, that was one of the groups that we need to hear from, and we're setting up to hear from the school system to see, first of all, how they envision it working. Also to hear from some of the officers to see if that is really the way the resource should work. For instance, I'm not certain how they work in lower middle and high school students. It seems like that would be a different thing. And so we do need to definitely look at them, because I think that sometimes a lot of the students, their first interaction with police officers outside of, their neighborhoods is really in school. And sometimes that's a very negative experience for some of our kids. We have kids, 22 clubs with one program and 23 with the others. And some of our kids have had very negative experiences. So I really want to see whether or not we can tweak that model. But that was one of the groups that we do need to still hear from. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gamble, I would also, though, I would say also in response to Tom's point, the hardest work I ever do around budgets is reallocating dollars, rather than when there are no new dollars. It's really tough to reallocate. But I think maybe the way to get going with this or to keep it moving forward is just with asking our city administration to do some really hard work, and the new chief. I think one of the things I'm looking for is someone who would be open to shifting that model. Again, it may have to be gradual, but I think we're at a very critical leverage point here, and I hope we can do that. But I sure share your concerns about city finances, and if we don't get this right in December, it's all bets are off on everything.
Two things for me, just in hearing it go back and forth. I think it's awesome. One, Sharon, I've gotten through to Asher while we've been on the call, and we're meeting tomorrow at 4:30. Just tell me what you want me to ask him for to come for us, and I'll ask him. So you just let me know. That's one. And then the second thing, I wonder, in listening to Mr. Haas's presentation, he talked about, it sounds like if we imagine a hill, right, it takes a little bit more effort to get up that hill, right? We've got to build up the energy to get up it. But after it gets on the other side of the hill, it goes down the hill. And some of what the police need to do and are being called to do, they have less responsibility. And that's what we've seen in the West Precinct. So Tom's question, can we afford not to, I think is a really interesting question. So really, when we're thinking about reallocating or thinking about little models, I think it would be good to give like a projected out, like a 10-year projection of how you want this hill to look and what it looks like reallocating to get to the apex of that hill, and then what it looks like 10 years from now once crime has gone down and deferred, and once it's followed, if it follows that trend that the West Precinct said, which was a 47% reduction, then in theory, we could staff the police force a little less. That's what I was hearing with both reallocation and staffing. So I think that would help us if we could project out 10 years. But I know that's a big if, but I think that's how we need to be thinking.
Sharon, can you be at that meeting at 4:30 tomorrow with Ashford?
That was just why I was, believe it or not, I was just going to see if Eli, if that was okay, because I am available.
That's why this is a cell phone call. I'll be happy to. That's why, when Dia said if you wanted to do things outside, let the chair people know. So I'd sent y'all an email because I've just been working my best. Right, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying my hardest. If you try really hard, you're bound to hit something. I'm trying hard. That's all I'm trying.
Okay. Do you want to make it? You're just gonna do a phone call? Do you want to make it a Zoom call or Ring Central call, which is powered by Zoom? But I can do either way.
Okay, I'll talk to him and then get back to you and let you know. I've got your contact stuff in the spreadsheet.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Works.
Thanks, Eli. That was fantastic. John, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just some observations. First, Larry, I was thinking about your comments and Tom's comments. Did Sergeant Picanza ever follow up with you? Did you connect with him?
No, I haven't connected with him. I never got his information after that call.
Okay. I'll work on putting you guys in touch. I think that would be good. He didn't have a chance to talk about this in his presentation, but it was really interesting when I went out to go visit him to hear him talk about how public safety improvements had resulted in gentrification. Landlords would come in, properties, increase rents, work with some landlords to try to negotiate unsuccessfully rents back down. But, the need for sort of a team approach really did stand out. And I do feel like just listening to the officers, that getting into that teamwork frame is something that, we need to do. Clearly there was a robust partnership with the West Nashville Dream Center, which was great. But, Metro needs to be a part of that as well. I had some questions for you, Bob, which I thought I was hoping to ask you about your expert, and also an update. So we're talking about trust building and the role of accountability in building trust. The policy committee is working on the COB relationship. They're going to be addressing that. We can definitely invite you to the session where they do that. Uh-huh. And, Ashley Davis and I can talk about that in a lot of detail. One thing that they've also been looking at is procedural justice. Mm-hmm. And Bob, I think Tracy Mears has very kindly agreed to come talk to the policies committee about procedural justice.
She's great.
It's an approach that I like. It seems to be evidence-based. They've gotten some good results in Chicago. I mean, limited, but good. Mm-hmm. And it also speaks to department culture. If you want to build trust, what, in your opinion, is the path to building trust? Is it accountability? Is it procedural justice? Is it recruiting, diversity? How do we get there, in your opinion?
So I think it's a number of things, but I think, first and foremost, it really has to be a genuine effort on the part of the police to start to do the initial outreach and engagement. That, there's been so much damage over time, and there has to be some reparation. So the police really have to make that first effort to really start to reach out and demonstrate that there's substance behind what they're doing. And that's why I think, the equipment you give those officers, the responsibility you give those officers, and you support those officers really is the beginning part of starting to build those relationships. The other component, which I didn't talk a lot about, John, is the notion of the community ambassadors, which we've established in Chicago. So there are two key components to this. Is what we call NPI, the Neighborhood-Based Policing Initiative, which is the police department's responsibility. And then identifying residents who are actively engaged in being advocates for their community, their neighbors, and really working on a parallel track, not being co-opted by the police, not being part of the police department, but separate and really wanting to be spokespersons for the neighborhood and actually building on their networks and connecting with their networks and actually having them do the introductions. What's interesting about that arrangement too is the DCOs see the community ambassadors as resources to them and actually start to rely upon them in terms of getting connected to services and, like I said, their own internal networks. So there's that other piece that has to be going on simultaneously, and it really has to be something that is homegrown and really develops in a parallel track or current track with when you start to build out MPI within the Metropolitan Police Department.
Another question I have for you is, you worked a lot in Chicago. Chicago has really struggled with gun violence. Mm-hmm. We have very high levels of gun violence as well, and we're looking at a year-to-date very significant increase in homicides in Nashville. It's gun violence related and driven. How does this strategy fit with trying to do something about gun violence specifically?
So you and I talked about this the other day in terms of Thomas Abbott's book. Actually, there's a TED Talk that I really encourage everybody to kind of look at. He kind of basically formulates the urgency in terms of how you deal with gun violence. And these larger conversations, really, they're important, but there's an urgency and there's really a need to start to intervene. And what he's saying, and he uses the analogy of a surgeon, you know, when a person comes into the hospital, he's not concerned about what they look like or whether or not they can pay their medical bills. His first response is life-saving. And what his message is, the police have to be engaged in that kind of mentality. That is about life-saving, engaging folks, trying to figure out how you can get folks out of that kind of lifestyle. I think Ms. Robinson talked about it too. There are some folks that really are going to need to understand that if they're not willing to accept the help, that there's going to be some accountability on the other end too. But being able to differentiate between that kind of approach in terms of going forward, and it also goes to David Kennedy's whole notion. Thomas doesn't talk about it, but the whole notion of focused deterrence. And we used it in Cambridge. We found it to be very effective. We used it in a much broader sense than what he was advocating for, but really demonstrated that if you offer help, people will come. And what's interesting, it's not so much the people that you're really trying to work with, but their family members, because they're impacted by what's going on in terms of the behavior. And every time we had a community meeting, every one of them came in with a family member or a significant other that really was there to support them, but also was looking for that kind of help and support. And also the relationship between the police and these folks changed. These are folks that have been in and out of jail repeatedly, but now the relationship has changed because they see the police as really being an advocate for them in terms of helping them for re-entry and understanding that they're members of the community as well, want a positive pathway in terms of their own lives.
I have, John, if you don't mind, I don't know if you have additional questions, but I do have a request. Sharon, I'm looking at you and Councilwoman, your point about resources. And I know there are some, there's a community safety town hall that is going to be focusing on Black, Hispanic youth, LGBTQ, and immigrant and refugee communities on the 21st. But I am interested in hearing directly from law enforcement on what they're doing to engage with diverse communities. And of course, given where I sit with immigrant origin families, as you recall, the rumors about ICE making its rounds completely disrupted the way that we were building trust, and it created a lot of confusion in the community. So while I love theorizing and thinking about the hypothetical, I want to bring us back to, I would love to hear directly from El Protector, right? What are they doing to engage immigrant Spanish-speaking families, Arabic-speaking individuals who are calling? Because if we don't hear directly from law enforcement, it's going to be very difficult for us to actually move the needle. Going back to Councilwoman Campbell's point of resources that are very limited. So let's see what they're doing right now. Let's look at the data, David, that you were mentioning, and see how we can influence this trust piece. And again, from my perspective, I'm just eager to hear directly, okay, these are the programs that they have. These are the number of Spanish-speaking Arabic officers that they have. When there are people talking about ICE, what are they doing? Because I know what we're doing. I know what our sister organizations are doing, but I want to hear directly from the source before we start moving and theorizing and dreaming with a budget that we might not have 6 months from today or in a year.
Well, El Protector was actually on the list that I gave that had all of these different things. That was one of the programs I wondered, is it working? Is it reality? Is it practice? What's going on with it? So that was one of the things I didn't know, because a lot of beautiful words are on a piece of paper, but I have no idea what's going on.
And just to give you an update on that, I did reach out to Acting Chief Drake and convey the need to get some answers on those questions. So what I would suggest is tomorrow when we have our follow-up meeting, we look at our lists and we reach out for those things. And MPD is very responsive. We can definitely say at an upcoming meeting we'd like to hear specifically from people interacting with new American populations. And I think we all share a goal of trying to line everything up because we need to prioritize who we want to hear from. And I also think that the LGBTQ plus community, particularly the trans community, is something that I've heard some concerns about. So, we can have more than one subject matter expert, although we've appreciated having you, Bob. You've been great. And we should let you go. It's late on the East Coast, unless anyone has any other questions for you. But let's get it scheduled. I take your point very much, Liana.
You had spoken about the Oasis Center, John.
Yes, it is unfortunate that we don't have freedom tonight. I've just been thinking about vulnerable populations that we haven't heard from. And one possibility would be if we want to have a meeting and hear from MPS and focus on SROs, perhaps that would be another time to try to get a youth perspective in. The Oasis Center could be a good resource for that. Larry, you might also want to sort of speak to that. It's possible there are people that you've worked with who you might want to bring to talk to the committee. I'm just mindful of our calendar, and if we need to hear from more than one SME, a couple of SMEs at a meeting, we can do that. We have time to do that, and so we just need to get ahead of the schedule.
And if we can add the homeless population community as well, having someone speak about that.
Absolutely, and we talked about reaching out to Judy Tackett to what I want to do with our follow-up committee, and maybe this is a good time. To ask you, Sharon and Melissa, do you feel like you have a sense from the committee of what the SMEs they want to hear from are?
I think we have the big buckets, unless there's something we're missing. Yes.
Sharon went through the list earlier. I don't think you were on when she went through it.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry, my computer crashed right in the middle of Bob's presentation and took about 5 minutes to reboot. It's very frustrating for someone who's very interested in his work.
Okay, I'll shoot something to you. But one thing that we have to look at is we have to look at, of course, the programs that already exist, and also someone representing that vulnerable group to see whether or not that has been addressed.
Totally agree with you.
Can you, before we talk tomorrow, John, confirm who Eric has lined up?
Yes, I should be able to do that, and I can definitely do that. I will bring that list to you, and I will share with you the list of SMEs. We have a little SME schedule document, which has SMEs for all the committees. So I'll share that with you, Judge Blackburn and Mr. Roberson, and share as you see fit with others. That'll give you a sense of the overall landscape.
That would be helpful.
And, workforce is pretty scheduled out. So it'll be good for you to see who's doing that. I also wanted to let you know that DIA has set up a data sharing folder, which contains the level setting package and other documents. You should all have access to it. Juliana, you were the first person to log in. Good job.
I'm trying.
We appreciate it. So that's there for all of you, and definitely for our follow-up tomorrow, I'll share that SME schedule chart with you so you can see who other people are looking to talk to.
Terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. We will see you.
Can I do one more thing? I don't know if I froze. Can I do one more thing?
Sure.
Okay. In terms of the buckets, I think one of the things that keeps coming up when we're talking about buckets is the issue in terms of downstream triage as it's related to 911 calls. I know that came up in the Tuesday Lunch and Learn. So I just want us to think in terms of how we, what would the role be of triaging to other support services that may help offload the police, and how that could be done structurally. I know in other cities they've started to look at this, whether it's Denver or Albuquerque. I know I talked to Dr. Valier about it. So I don't know what big bucket that fits in, Sharon, but the big bucket of how do we make sure that the support gets where it needs to get as quickly as possible, big bucket. Does that make sense what I'm asking? Sorry if that's not more clear.
You mean like 911 tends to be we're going to dispatch an officer in Nashville. You're saying 911 may mean I send crisis, in mental health crisis, or I send, the social services, or I send this person.
Exactly. Yeah. And Bob was talking about when Alignment Nashville was done to line up education, right? How can we do an alignment social services that may be a resource that's not there, right? And that ties into what the officer was talking about on Tuesday when he said, we have this, but we don't have anybody who looks over it. We don't have anybody who's sharing the data, that's owning the data, sharing it back and forth. So I just would like to keep that as a big bucket in terms of thinking about that responsibility. Thank you, Sharon, for clarifying that.
Well, and that goes into this whole concept. Are we asking police to do some
exactly?
Really necessarily, or they're not really the best resource. Okay.
But it kind of got dumped there.
Yeah, because we didn't have an alternative or didn't choose to have one.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Don't forget, next week it's at 4:00, and we will see everyone Thursday at 4:00. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.